What's up guys, this is my first YouTube video and it's gonna be on the Caro Kann defense, defense to 1e4. So let's start. After e4, c6 signals that black's gonna be playing the Caro Kann defense, and the whole idea of this move is that we're gonna be playing d5, striking back at the white's pawn center. The difference between the Caro Kann and other openings which also use the d5 pawn advance, such as the Scandinavian and the French defense, is that in the Scandinavian defense, while our queen's getting harassed in the opening phase of the game, and it can be harassed later on as well, while in the French defense, after e6, d4, d5, this bishop on c8 is going to have trouble finding a square for itself. So the Caro Kann addresses both of these problems. So after e4, c6, d4, d5, our bishop on c8 is free to develop on the diagonal later on, and our queen isn't getting harassed. So that's why you should play the Caro Kann defense. So after c6, d4, d5, today we're going to be covering the move knight to c3, which you're going to be seeing over 50% of the time. In later videos I'll be covering the fantasy variation, which is f3, the advanced variation e5, and the exchange and panel variations. So after knight to c3, black needs to find a square for this light squared bishop, and the only way to do it is by exchanging on e4, getting the f5 square. So after d takes e, white's going to play knight takes e4, and after bishop to f5, the knight is hanging, and white's going to have to either retreat the knight or defend it, while there aren't really any good ways of defending it, because if you play bishop d3, we can just take this pawn. If you play queen to e2, you're blocking in your own bishop. If you play f3, you're taking away the best square for your knight. If you play queen to d3, well, you're just pinning yourself. And so if all of the methods of defending this piece aren't that great, well, you're going to have to retreat it, and there are two retreats in this position. You can play knight to c3 or knight to g3. Knight to c3 isn't really good in this position because you are blocking this pawn on c2, and you're not going to be able to support this pawn on d4. So later on, black's going to be able to play moves such as e6 and then c5, exchanging off this flank pawn for the center pawn, and black's going to equalize very easily. So the main move and the best move in this position is knight to g3, gaining another tempo on our bishop. So we're going to have to move this piece because there aren't any good ways of defending it. If we play e6, for example, white can just take this piece, and he's got the bishop here, and black already has bad pawn structure. So we're going to retreat this piece, bishop g6, and now h4. Because of the entire piece placement, h5 will threaten to win the bishop. So we're going to have to make a cubbyhole for the bishop with h6, and now white's going to play knight to f3, maintaining the tension in the position, not playing h5 straight away, because he wants to play knight to e5, gaining a tempo on our bishop, which is going to be forced to retreat, because if black allows this capture on g6, let's just say knight to f6, knight to e5, e6 takes, this pawn on g6 is extremely weak, and bishop d3 is going to hurt a lot for black. So if black can't allow this, he's going to be forced to retreat the bishop, and white has gained a tempo. So this is not good for black. So we need to cover the square e5, and the only way to do this is by playing knight d7. And now if knight to e5, we can simply exchange on e5 and exchange the queens. And after rook to d8, if bishop to d2 is still in a pin, and black's already doing fine and slightly better. So after knight to d7, white's going to continue gaining space on the king side with h5. And this pawn on h5 is going to allow white to attack black really easily on the king's flank if black castles on that side of the board. However, the drawback of playing h5 is that this pawn is really weak and it can be attacked in the middle game and in the end game, and if white's not careful, they may lose this pawn. So after h5, bishop h7, since black has already spent 3 moves with the light squared bishop, bishop f5, bishop g6, bishop h7, white's going to exchange off this piece for his own light squared bishop. And now after queen takes, black is going to play e6, giving him more options. He can later develop this bishop on this diagonal as well. So in this position we have two main moves for white, bishop f4 and bishop to d2. Well, white doesn't really want to castle kingside because this pawn on h5 is extremely weak, as I said before, and probably black's gonna win it very quickly with knight to f6 and queen to a5, and maybe even exchanging off this pawn. Sorry, this knight on g3, and just winning this pawn. And in the knight c3 mainline, in most cases, white wants the castle on the queen side, and this is where he's gonna castle. So the main two moves are bishop f4 and bishop to d2, and I won't be going over too many variations at this stage, as this is the first video for the knight c3 mainline, and in the next video I will go in depth over the the bishop d2 and bishop f4 lines. And now I'll just talk briefly about the main plans in this pawn structure. So if we look at the pawn structure, black's pawn structure is extremely solid with no weaknesses. However, white has a weakness on h5, as we can see over here, but white has compensation for this. He has an development advantage, 2 knights and a queen out already, while black only has a knight on d7 out, and that's white's compensation. However, black's disadvantage behind in development isn't really significant because his position is extremely solid, and white is going to have trouble finding weaknesses to attack. And the main pawn break in this position is c5 for black, and for white it's going to be c4 and d5, breaking in the center. And if either side achieves their pawn breaks, then they will be doing extremely well. And okay, the old treatment of the Caro Kann was to play queen to c7 and castling queenside, but the modern treatment is just to play normally with knight to f6, bishop e7 and castle kingside, and we are not afraid of the attack on the king side with g4, maybe sacrificing the g4 and sacrificing here, knight to f5, because because there are many methods for black to open up the center extremely quickly and counter white's flank operations. So that's all for this video, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See you guys later.